Hello. Welcome back. We're looking at some famous and not so famous Bible characters. Last week we looked at Zeruiah. We found out that she's mentioned a lot of times in the Old Testament, but usually always in connection with the sons. So it'll say the son's name and it'll say son of Zeruiah. And we talked about what it would be like to have a legacy that our children followed us, particularly if we have our faith strong and we see it in our children, like Paul saw it in Timothy as he looked at the grandmother and mother of Timothy. So as we work today, I want to look at first a book that I think is really interesting. It's called The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. It's a very interesting book. And it is a book about a man named Uncle Screwtape, who is Satan's right-hand man. And he's writing to his nephew, Wormwood, trying to instruct him on how to secure the damnation of a person. Listen to what he says. "Be not deceived, Wormwood. Our cause is never more in jeopardy than when a human, no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy's will," talking about God's will, "looks around upon a universe in which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and yet he still obeys. Our cause is never more in jeopardy than when that person feels as if he's been forsaken, and yet he still obeys." We're going to look at a character today that is exactly like that. We're going to look at a man named Asaph. I don't know if you know that name or not. You've probably seen it in the Psalms. A lot of times above a psalm it'll say a Psalm of David, or sometimes it'll say a Psalm of Asaph. So let's learn a little bit about him. He was chosen by David from 4,000 other musically gifted Levites. In fact, there were 3 of them that were chosen, and they were in leadership roles in the worship and the celebrations that the Israelites had. We learn that Asaph's sons also followed in his footsteps, being gifted in music also. David used him in the celebration as the Ark of the Covenant was returned to Jerusalem. Solomon used him in the dedication of the temple. He was quite a gifted man, and he was even known as a seer, and many of his words that you see in the Psalms are considered prophecies. He wrote 12 Psalms, and so we're going to look at this highly esteemed religious leader, musician that was thought of by David and Solomon as very talented. We're going to look at one of his Psalms. It's Psalm 73. And you know, as we go there, I wonder, have you ever really thought about the suffering and evil around you to the point that it makes you doubt God, or makes you feel like you've just been forsaken because it seems like the evil people are doing well and the good people are not? Let's look at this in Psalm 73, and we're going to notice Asaph's words of doubt until he gets strength from going to God. So I've studied this from several translations. I've used the ESV, I've used the NIV, the New King James, and but I think I'm going to read today from the NLT because I like the wording on some of these scriptures. So if you will, turn to Psalm 73 in whatever version you have of the Bible and follow along with me, and we'll take a little bit at a time. We're going to start with the first 5 verses. Here's what Asaph says. "Truly God is good to Israel, to those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping, and I was almost gone. For I envied the proud when I saw them prosper despite their wickedness. They seem to live such painless lives. Their bodies are so healthy and strong. They don't have troubles like other people. They're not plagued with problems like everyone else. If you look at what he's saying, you'll notice that he starts out, he knows that God is good, and he states that right off at the front. But then he talks about, but you know what? I almost lost my footing. Have you ever done that? Have you ever almost slipped because you got discouraged? Well, this is what Asaph says happened to him. He began to envy the proud and the wicked. And he even thought that they didn't have troubles. Now, he's exaggerating a little bit here, but don't we do that when we get discouraged? Sometimes the whole situation seems to get worse and worse, and we exaggerate how it really is. And so let's look at verses 11 through 14 in the chapter. I'm skipping over 6 through 10, which is just a description more of the evil people that he's noticing. But let's go to verse 11, and he's still talking about the evil people. He says, "What does God know?" they ask. "Does the Most High even know what's happening? Look at these wicked people enjoying a life of ease while their riches multiply. Did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain." Wow. You know, he's quoting what the evil people are starting to say, but is he starting to think it too? Does the Most High ever know what's going on? What's really happening in this world? And did I do all of the good things that I've been trying to do in my life? Did I do it for nothing? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Now he's starting to sound like he's in a pity party. Yeah, he's starting to, the more he concentrates on this, the more he thinks about it, the worse it gets for him. And he feels like he's not getting anything but trouble all day long. And so let's look at verses 15 through 17. "If I had really spoken this way to others, I would have been a traitor to your people." So notice he's keeping it a secret. When he was doubting, he didn't let others know that he was doing that. "So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but what a difficult task it is." Now listen. "Then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood the destiny of the wicked." Notice here that he talks about, I hated to even say it out loud what I was thinking. I had such doubts. And so I really tried to understand. And then I realized that I had to go to God to find out these things. And he says, "Then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood." So let's look at verses 18 through 20. "Truly, you put them on a slippery path and send them sliding over the cliff to destruction." He's talking about these evil people now. "In an instant they are destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. When you arise, O Lord, you will laugh at their silly ideas as a person laughs at dreams in the morning." So he realizes that he knows that God's going to take care of the evil. He realizes now and understands that they're going to be destroyed, and God will even laugh at all of the questions that they had and all of the mocking that they did of God. And then verses 21 and 22. Listen to this. He says, "Then I realized that my heart was bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you." You know, I like the idea that he said, "I realized." He came to the reality of things instead of going on and on thinking in his doubtful way of all the bad things going on around him. And he realizes that he was foolish. And he even says, "God, I must seem like a senseless animal to you." Have you ever heard someone say, "Why, he's as dumb as an ox"? Well, that's kind of where this saying came from. He's saying, I know I seemed ridiculous to you, God, in all my questions that I had. And then verses 23 through 27, yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to a glorious destiny. Whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. My health may fail and my spirit may grow weak, but God remains the strength of my heart. He is mine forever. Those who desert him will perish, for you destroy those who abandon you. I like the fact that he realizes that, you know what? I still belong to God. And he's still holding my hand. He has been all along. You guide me. And I realize that I don't have anybody really in heaven or on earth besides you, God. You're the one that I can trust. And I desire you more than anything on earth. Let's go on to, and my health may fail and my spirit may grow weak, but God remains the strength of my heart. I love that, particularly in this time where we're scared. The virus makes us fearful of the fact that we may know someone that gets it, or we ourselves may get it, and it's a fearful time. And yet we need to realize that even though my health may fail, my spirit may grow weak, I want to remember that God remains the strength of my heart. And then I looked at the ESV on this, where he is remembering what God has done for him. And he says, nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand. He's realizing, Asaph knows now as he looks back, God's been with me all along. Why did I think that I was by myself? And then finally, verse 28. But as for me, how good it is to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter, and I will tell everyone about the wonderful things you do. What a turnaround. He now realizes it is so good to be near God and to realize that I'm near God. And he says, I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter. And I will tell everyone about the wonderful things that God has done in my life. You know, in our ladies' class, we've discussed the idea of telling our story, telling our faith story. That if we want our children and grandchildren to know a little bit about what all's gone on in our life, write it down. Write down the story of your faith. And when you went through difficult times, how God pulled you through that. I think it would be very, very beneficial for our children and grandchildren to know that about us. There's a book called Working Through an Asaph Moment by Tim Zacharias. And he looks at this idea of doubting. And he asks the question, have you ever had an Asaph moment? And I think many of us can say, yes, I have. I've doubted. I've been discouraged. I've asked God, why have you forsaken me? Why does everyone else seem like doing okay and I'm not? Yeah, I think we all have. And he divides the psalm up a little bit differently than I did, but I did on the paper that I'm attaching to this. I want you to look at it and you'll see how he divides it up. But I like one of the things he says at the end. He says, even though I had these secret doubts and I went to God's sanctuary to find out and understand all that I'm worried about, and he finally says, but you know what? At the end, it's all good. Verse 28, it's all good. If I look and realize that God is near, and that's the most important thing that I can have in my life. And so, as we look at today's takeaway from this particular character, Asaph, and the writing that he did in Psalm 73, I think we can look at, why am I questioning God? Because maybe we need to question my questions, question my doubt, and be easy on yourself sometimes. Maybe you're going through difficult times. Look at that. Try to decide, why am I feeling like I am? And try to discover those things that you can change and other things that you can't, that you just have to trust God to take care of. Immerse myself in worship, prayer, and study. You know, that's what turned around Asaph's thinking, didn't it? When he decided that he would go to God and he would determine what was really true. And then the idea that we realize that God is with me. Sometimes we forget that. And we can do as Asaph. He says one of the greatest gifts he had was the nearness of God. And so we need to think about that and realize that God is near us. Talk to him each day. Make sure you stay close in that connection. And finally, I suggest to kneel beside Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. When you think about Jesus and what all he went through before his crucifixion in that garden, as he prayed and as he had such difficulty in accepting all the things that he was getting ready to do, and yet God's will was done, and that's what he wanted. I think that in our moment of crisis, that we can know that we're not the first to be here. We're not the first to question or to have difficulties or to be discouraged. So we need to know and feel God's presence right here in our own crisis. I hope that this study of Asaph will help you. I hope you'll go back and read this chapter. And remember Psalm 73 if you ever get discouraged. Read what he says is the answer to your doubts. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.